it's important that I am at least honest with myself and honest with somebody else so that they have the information that they need to make a decision. But if I say, oh, I agree, this is horrible, and I'm going to get some help, and I have no intention of doing that, then that really is outside of my hoop. I'm not even owning where I am on this particular issue. And so part of this staying in our hoop is getting clear what is true for us about a particular situation, and then having the courage to be able to speak it, even though we may not like the outcome. You know, one of the things that we talk about is, for those of us that struggle with hiding and lying, one of the things that we're trying to do is to manipulate the outcome or determine the outcome. But it's important that we offer clear information, and then the other person from their hoop gets to decide what they're going to do with that.
Welcome to the Faithful and True podcast. I'm Randy Everett, your co-host, and today again we are here with Dr. Greg Miller, our host. Always good to see you, Greg. And our special guest today is the director of Faithful and True, Debbie Laaser. Debbie, thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome.
It's kind of a nice, we have an exciting subject to discuss today. People have previously seen other podcasts that we've done about the three hoops. And today we're going to dive a little deeper into the three hoops.
Right. So just as an introduction, for those of you that may not be familiar with it, the three hoops are a model that we use here at Faithful and True, and specifically working with couples, and it just represents development in the coupleship. And there are three hoops. One is each person has their own hoop, and then there's one hoop that represents the coupleship. And kind of where we're standing, how we are in relationship with other people can be illustrated in the three hoops. Today, we're going to talk more specifically about what does it look like to be in my hoop, and how do I relate to my spouse from my hoop when I'm having a reaction or a thought or have a need. How do I stay in my hoop and communicate that?
It sounds like a kind of a weird question, doesn't it?
Yes.
I mean, all of us that are here at Faithful and True and have gone through workshops or in groups and so forth, we use this language all the time. And I think it's healthy because we learn that when we're not in our hoop and we jump into someone else's, we're generally doing or saying something that triggers them, creates arguments. Oftentimes it doesn't represent the person we want to be, so it doesn't end up to be a good thing. Right. So the question is always, once we show people the hoop demonstration, well, how can I talk from my own hoop then? What's allowed?
Right.
And this gets into another teaching that I believe would be helpful if we had more time to go into it, but it's about our iceberg model, which basically talks about a number of different things we can say that represent parts of who we are, whether it's what we're feeling, what we're thinking, what we're needing, some of the deeper truths in our lives, and definitely the assumptions or perceptions or beliefs we have about something we're seeing. So those are all things we can talk about, but we could get into more detail about how we do that and maybe give our audience a little bit of an example or two along the way.
One of the things I think that's great is even the question is a question that's identifying, I want to do it differently. You know, we've all been in relationships, and there are times where the relationship is functioning in a healthy way, in an unhealthy way. We've been criticized or judged, and we may be sensitive to that, or we may have someone in our life that tried to manipulate us or control us using their words. And so, again, we can be sensitive to that. So how do we engage someone that we care about? And again, like I said, express our needs and our desires without it being controlling, without it being manipulative, or even being critical. It's just simply maybe an assessment that we want to be able to share. And it is complicated given for some of us, our history of this has not been good and it's not been safe.
So a lot of us know what not to do because we get those triggers from the other folks and we know it's not going well. But if we start with, say, a trigger of my own, let's just say that something I've noticed out there is creating an emotional reaction to me, and I ideally do want to talk about it, although that's even a first step, is when we are triggered or we're noticing something, we have an emotional reaction or we have a need of some kind in our own hoop, it's our responsibility to initiate a conversation about that. A lot of times we might use a passive way of trying to get noticed about something, like let's just say my shoulder is killing me because I fell on it the other day. And instead of actually talking about it, I might just sit here when I'm with you all and I'm just doing this and I got a strange look on my face and you have no idea what's wrong with me. And so then it leaves it up to you to start the conversation.
Right.
But if I'm talking in a healthy way from my hoop, when I have something going on, whether it's an emotional reaction or a problem that's happening, I will initiate the conversation. And it might start with just, I notice that I have a lot of pain in my shoulder today. And so I'm noticing what's going on and I'm sharing that. And we could go even further into the next things I might say.
Right. Well, and let's put it in a relational context. Let's say that we're cleaning up here at Faithful and True and we're needing to move some boxes. And I just say, hey, Deb, can you move that box? In that moment, you have an option of saying, well, actually, I can't today. I've hurt my shoulder. Or you can just decide to do it and maybe resent me for asking you, but you didn't tell me your shoulder hurt. Or one of the things that we see a lot is it creates chaos when I expect somebody else to know my need. There can be an old core belief that if you really loved me or if you really knew me, you would know my needs and I wouldn't have to ask for them. And so this is how it kind of gets complicated in relationships. I just ask you, hey, can you help? And if you don't have the capacity just to be honest about what's going on, then we've got this relational dynamics that's going to create some chaos.
And I might have some history too. It's like what I might be thinking in the story in my head might also be something I want to share because it's like, I've kind of noticed he doesn't do much around here. He just hands off all these obligations to everybody else. And so maybe I'm really angry about that, And the story in my head is they just expect me to do everything around here.
Right.
And so that could create a problem in terms of whether I cope with that and angrily talk about it because I've had some history which I've never talked about, or I could get honest and just say, I'm just wondering, is there something going on? Because the story in my head is that a lot of this has fallen on me and it doesn't seem quite fair.
Right. And there can be a history of, in my family, you were never to whine. You were never to complain. You were just, if you were asked to do something, you were to do it. And so I'm feeling kind of resentful that I've been asked, but I also have this great sense of obligation that I don't want people to think I'm weak. I don't want people to think I'm not a team player. And so I just dive into it, but then that creates all kinds of chaos for me personally, but then that can easily show up in the relationship.
And hopefully what you're already seeing is there could be all kinds of stories or interpretations in my head going on just by a simple question. Could you move these boxes?
Right.
And it could be that I'm grateful. It's like story in my head is, well, thanks for thinking I'm strong enough to pick this stuff up and move it for you. And so that could be a good story in my head. That may not be your truth at all, but you just ask the question. Right. I think one of the things that happens when we're trying to talk from our hoop is being clear enough so that people know what we're thinking. And in regard to that is owning what we're thinking. My thought is, you ask me because you know how strong I am, and that helps you out a lot. And so I'm owning the fact that this is just my thought, story in my head. It might not be yours, though.
Right.
And it gives you a chance to clean it up, so to speak, if I didn't get that right.
Right. Well, and I do think a lot of times there can be an old message of we don't talk about this, that if we had a better relationship, we wouldn't have to talk about this, or it feels too vulnerable or personal, or I've been honest in the past and it's come back to hurt me. Somebody weaponized my truth. And it is important that all of this stuff that's getting stirred up into us, that we find ways to express it in a safe context, because again, we're left with a residue in our relationship and within ourselves if we don't pay attention to these things that are getting activated or triggered in us in these conversations that come up. And, it could be a situation, we can move it from an office to our home where we're already kind of charged. We already have a lot of meanings and messages. We have some history together. And so that can easily result in distance, arguments, fighting, without there being some honest conversation.
I think we should take this to a level of an example in our field.
Okay.
Should we do that?
Sure.
And just assume that for the moment, maybe we're a couple. So maybe, and this just was going on in a session I had today, whereas a wife was noticing that her husband was watching pornography. And so they had talked about it before. Because actually they're not married, they're just together thinking about the future together. And so in thinking about that, she shared with him how hurtful pornography had been in a prior relationship of hers. And so she wanted to know honestly if it was a problem for him. And he did not admit to that at that time. So as the relationship...
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Did he admit that he was watching pornography and she had seen him, or did he even deny that he was even looking at pornography?
He denied that he was looking at it, and at this point in their relationship, she hadn't seen it yet.
Okay.
But as the relationship went on, she had seen it.
Okay.
And so she did ask him, and that's when he sort of admitted to it.
Right.
And so then the question becomes, how else can she talk from her hoop? So, some of the unhealthy ways might be to blame him. It's like, you are like all men. All men look at this stuff, and it's so disgusting.
Right.
It could be something like that, where she's blaming him, or you haven't been telling me the truth. So again, more blaming and shaming going on there. Or she might switch to, again, one of her needs in the relationship. It's like, I've been a part of a relationship where this was not addressed, and I know I just can't commit to one again. And so it's really important to me that you tell me the truth.
Right. What's interesting is, in this situation, if she were to say, you were lying to me, that's actually true, because if I've been looking at pornography, you caught me looking at pornography, but I denied it and said I hadn't been. For her to say you have been lying could be a true statement, is a true statement. And yet that may not be the best way to share it, because then it does feel like some sort of maybe hostile, accusatory, critical type of statement that he's going to have reaction to. And so sometimes maybe from our own hoop, we have to ask the question, what is the greater value? What do I want to be heard about this? Do I want to be heard that I've caught you? Do I want to be heard that it's painful when someone lies to me? Do I want to be heard that even though you're lying, I still believe in our relationship and want something to come out? But if I can get clear about what is it I'm wanting in this communication, I can do that from my own hoop, and then that helps to frame maybe what it is that I want to say.
Which would lead to her knowing what she needs as she's talking about it, right? So in this case, I think what she decided was she didn't want to leave the relationship, and she didn't really even want to separate from it. Her need, though, became that I clearly saw it. In my opinion, so she's owning what she's saying, this is a problem, and I need for you to get help with a specialist in this field. So that was really clear, and it was all in her hoop because it was about her and what she saw, what she believed was true, what she needed. It was all in her hoop without dumping it, so to speak, on the other hoop.
Right. And what's true is, from my hoop, I can say, I agree with you. I do think this is a problem. I've been dealing with this since childhood, and I'm committed to reaching out to get help. Or I can say, actually, I don't think it's a problem. I think people look at pornography. I don't think it's that big of a deal. And so I don't have any plans to change this. But it's important that I am at least honest with myself and honest with somebody else so that they have the information that they need to make a decision. But if I say, oh, I agree, this is horrible, and I'm going to get some help, and I have no intention of doing that, then that really is outside of my hoop. I'm not even owning where I am on this particular issue. And so part of this staying in our hoop is getting clear what is true for us about a particular situation, and then having the courage to be able to speak it, even though we may not like the outcome. You know, one of the things that we talk about is, for those of us that struggle with hiding and lying, one of the things that we're trying to do is to manipulate the outcome or determine the outcome. But it's important that we offer clear information, and then the other person from their hoop gets to decide what they're going to do with that.
So another thing we can talk about from our hoop is just what our truth is. You know, so my truth in this situation, or my clients as it was today, could be, you know, I hear that you don't think this is a big problem. And unfortunately for me, it is. And so we have differences of opinion. And over time, I'll need to make some decisions about whether this is something I can live with or not. So, you know, that's my truth for today. And I'm not going to do anything about it in the moment, but I am going to take it very seriously.
Right. And maybe for me, a truth could be, you know what, I've never really saw this as a big deal. I've never really thought about it. I have just been looking at it. My friends look at it. I hear that you're having a reaction to it, and I'm going to consider that as I kind of look to determine what I'm going to do with this. But again, I'm not trying to placate you. I'm not going to go, well, you know, please don't leave me. I'm going to do everything I can to stop this. If that's not what I mean, if that's not true for me.
So you might notice, as you all are listening, that what's not in your hoop is the freedom to try to change another person. You know, my job is not, we call it hoop hopping here, when we hop into someone else's hoop and we try to change what they're saying, what they're doing, what you're believing. Don't you know you're not a very good person? You must not be a Christian if you believe that. You know, again, so we jump over there and we make a lot of assumptions about how that person should live their life. Again, usually not very helpful. Usually ends up in some kind of argument or distance. So instead, we can stick to what our values are and my morals are and what I need in my life. And you can choose whether that's something you believe in as well and are willing to work on that, or whether you're not. And unfortunately, it doesn't always lead to sustaining the relationship, and sometimes those are deal breakers, and they lead to divorce, or in this case, never marrying.
In this situation where you have challenged me, you're looking at pornography, I can either go into my shame of, oh, I'm this horrible man, I can't be loved, nobody will ever stay with me, I'm hopeless, I can't change, and that's not going to serve the relationship. Or I can go with blame and say, you're too critical, your expectations are too great, everybody does this, why is it such a big deal to you? That's not going to be helpful. What we're wanting is that ownership piece of, you know what's true is I did lie to you because this has been a part of my life, and I'm sorry that it took you catching me for me to be able to acknowledge that. And I get to decide what I'm going to do with this. That just because you have a reaction to me doesn't mean you're trying to control me. And I think that control word can be can be weaponized, where if somebody has an opinion and has a reaction to something, that doesn't mean that they're trying to control me. They're just responding to something that they've experienced in me. What's also true is if I am trying to control or manipulate somebody, I'm not grounded in my own truth and in my own hoop. I've actually jumped into their hoop trying to make decisions for them.
And I think the control piece would end up showing up regularly, like every day. Have you thought any more about whether you're getting help? You know, a lot of questions usually go with control, because control is about not feeling safe, generally speaking. So there are a lot of questions. They come too frequently. And that's a matter of, again, probably an insecurity of feeling unsafe about what's going on. So it's understandable why the questions pour out. But again, questions sometimes we have to ask questions, not have to. We do, just to get to know something about someone. On the other hand, when they're about like interrogating another person, which they often come off that way, they're really, again, about hoop hopping. Questions usually have some other stuff as part of them, which is, I'm really feeling this way, thinking this way, and I need this, but I'm going to put it out as a question to you instead.
Right.
So we want to try to reverse that as well in terms of healthy hoop talk.
And being out of my hoop typically comes with a hidden agenda. There's something that I'm wanting from you, but I'm not being honest about it. But if I'm being honest, it's okay to have an agenda. I just need to be upfront and honest about what the agenda is. Okay, so let's role play. Okay. So let's say you catch me looking at pornography. You come to me and you say, you lied to me initially, but I've caught you. I see that you're looking at pornography. You have done some research. You have found faithful and true. And you say, I have found a place where I would like for you to call. And I say, okay, I will. I will call faithful and true. You give me the information, but then I don't say anything else about it.
Okay.
So what does it look like for you to stay in your hoop and re-engage this topic with me not being the one that brings it up?
Well, I could start with just saying, I've just noticed that you haven't said anything about my suggestion, and it's been about 2 weeks now. And I was wondering whether you were going to do something about it. And I think the story in my head is starting to become, you're not going to do something about it because so much time has passed. And my temptation is to start asking you a lot of questions. And I want to try to do this differently and stay in my hoop. So I'm just going to say that I really desire, my truth is I really, really desire for you to work on this so we can grow our relationship and not live with some of these things we're not talking about. And my need would be for, by the end of this week, that you really do something, and perhaps that you would check back in with me and let me know.
Right. And I think that last part is really important. This idea that the expectation you're communicating is that whatever I do, either reach out or not reach out, that I will check back in and let you know whether or not I have. And on my part, I could say, you know what, to be honest, I've thought about it and I don't think I have a problem. And so I went to their website, and it seems like they're a bunch of wackos, so why would I reach out to them? I'm not as bad as them. And so I'm just being honest with you about that. And then you get to decide what you're going to do. Or I might say, well, I did look at the website, but my shame was so great, there's no way I can call anybody and talk about this. Or just to say, I didn't look at the website, and to be honest, I don't have a plan to. And again, from my hoop, I'm sharing information. My partner may not like this information.
That's right.
She gets her reaction to the information, but I'm being honest about what is going on. And we often talk about clarity as kindness. So the clearer that I can be about where I am and what I'm willing to do is actually kindness to the other person, because I'm giving them information so that they can make whatever decision that they need to make.
Okay, so you want my response? Okay, a good one or a bad one?
Mine was, it's a beautiful website.
My response would be, I'm really disappointed to hear that. And I so hoped that you would at least try. And what I know is, even if you don't do something, I am. So I'm planning to call and get my own appointment and to get some counseling about what I can do when you don't do something. And I think that's going to be my next step.
What's great about that response is it reinforces this idea, from my hoop, I have choices. Sometimes in our coupleship, we can easily believe my choices are determined by my spouse's choices. And in some cases, because of the partnership, that may be true. But there's a lot of space where I get to choose for myself, my own health, my own wellness, my own sense of support. I get to gather whatever information. And what we can reverse this, because sometimes we have men who are, invested. They're the ones that found Faithful and True. A friend or a coworker or somebody told them about us. They come, they have this meaningful experience. And then what they're aware of is that their spouse is not responding in any way and is kind of sending the message, well, this is your issue. If this is helpful for you, great. I don't want to be a part. So we also want to acknowledge that in the coupleship, it can be either the person struggling with the addiction that is resistant or is getting help, or it could be the spouse who is resistant or getting help.
So why don't you role play back, and I'm the spouse that won't get engaged.
Okay.
So how would you talk to me?
Okay, so let's assume that we've had enough conversation. I've been to the workshop, and you knew I was going.
I knew you were going.
So I'm
good, because he needs a lot of help,
That's so true, Dan.
No.
So I come back and I say, I went to this workshop, and one of the things I was introduced to is that there's not just support for me, but there's also support for my spouse, for you, and I know my choices have really hurt you, and I would love for you to get the help that you could benefit from if I've hurt you. And I also know that this was a good place for me, and I would love if you could be open to maybe calling them and seeing about the resources they have for you.
Well, that's a really nice thought, but you know how withdrawn I am and quiet I am. I just can't imagine talking about this stuff with other people, and I'm just fine. I'm just fine here alone at home.
Okay. Well, I'm sad to hear that. And my hope is when you're ready for help, that you'll be able to reach out and get the support that you need. And when you're ready, I want to be here to encourage you and support you, because I know that I have hurt you with the choices that I've made.
Well, that sounds really nice. But I don't know. I just don't think I can do that. So there again, I have choices.
Yeah.
And eventually, if it's 6 months from now, and I'm sitting over here still blaming or shaming or whatever because I haven't had help to deal with my pain, it could be you have more choices too.
Right.
And it might be that you're not willing to also live that way.
Right.
That you need help with a coupleship or whatever.
And here's what's so common, because this is the side that I can get sometimes, where I'm working with a guy, been working with him for an extended amount of time. He's doing really well. His wife is still resistant, maybe not hostile, but kind of resistant. And it does feel for him that his options are limited, because that idea that I'm the one that hurt you, I'm the one that betrayed you. Now I'm having a reaction to the fact that you're not getting support, and I'm starting to experience or continuing to experience the consequences of that. And the thing I want men to understand is that you still have choices. Wise men always have choices. So even the choice to stay is a choice. And it's that idea that just because you don't leave doesn't mean that you're staying. And it is a choice to stay, knowing that at this point, my spouse isn't open to getting support. She still seems to be kind of recycling her pain. And with that information, I'm going to choose to stay connected and engaged in the relationship.
Another thing that I think we can talk about from our hoop is trying to help another person who may not be able to talk yet from their hoop about what's going on. So I'm thinking, like, what if you were to say to me, I wonder sometimes if part of your fear or your resistance is that you think if you go, you're accepting blame for what I've done. Because that's a common reaction from wives, So, I mean, that's, I think, something you could offer me. And it might just be that little kind of help when I'm in quicksand to say, I have thought about that. Why should I go? This is your problem. And if I go, it's like I'm admitting that I had something to do with your choices. And I'm not willing to admit that.
Right.
So then you can speak about what your truth is about that.
Right.
And that could be helpful, and it could be a breakthrough also.
One of the things that we do from our own hoop is we do not make assumptions for the other person, And we can easily do that. Is, well, you're just afraid to go. That's not going to be helpful. But to be able to say, I don't know if this is true for you, and what may be true is the idea of going and being in the city by yourself or being with a bunch of people you don't know might feel intimidating to you. And I can just say that was true for me too. That was really scary to go into that room not knowing anybody. And if there's anything I can do to help you with that, if that's the case, I would love to be able to do that.
So I love that part of talking from our hoop too. We can offer that we would help if there was anything that they could name that we might be able to do.
Right.
Talking from my hoop.
Yes.
We have run out of time. But we want to thank you both for being with us today. This has been a fascinating subject. We hope that our listeners and viewers have benefited greatly from Debbie and Greg's conversation today. We'd like to invite you to visit our website, faithfulandtrue.com, where you'll find many resources available to you, as well as over 550 podcasts similar to this one. And we also have many resources available, as well as the online information and registration capabilities for our 3-day intensive workshops. We have the Men's Journey Workshop every month. We have the Women's Journey Workshop quarterly. And we also have 2 couples journey workshops available. So visit faithfulandtrue.com for more information, and we hope that you'll check us out. In the meantime, we hope this coming week for you is a week that's filled with many blessings and with great vision.